this video, I'll be talking about creating a Revit family from scratch. My example will be creating a table that can stretch to different sizes. In Revit, we're going to start by creating a new family. So on the left here, under Families, I'll click New. When you create a family from scratch, it's best to choose a template that is similar to what you're creating. So I'll be creating a table. I guess that should fall under the category of furniture. So I'll pick this furniture template. So when I'm inside of this family file, the tools in the ribbon are different than what you would see in a project file. So on the Create tab, we have things like Extrusion, Blend, Revolve, Sweep, Sweep Blend, and we also have void forms. So if you're familiar with 3D modeling, that would be helpful. I'm not going to get to go through everything, but I will show some of these 3D modeling tools as we build our table. Let me save my file. I'll save it to my Revit Advanced folder, Families. And I'll just call this table. You do get backup files as usual, so 3 backup files should be fine, and I'll click Save. All right, so it's now saved to an RFA, a family file. If we look at these lines here, these are reference planes. So I have a center left-right reference plane, and I have a center front-back reference plane. They're pinned, and where they intersect is usually our base point. So just keep that in mind. Over on the left, we have a few different views. So reference level is looking top down. So it's under floor plan. And then ceiling plan reference level is looking bottom up. We also have a 3D view. I'll double click to see what that one looks like. Doesn't show much. And then we also have some elevation views back. So reference level there, that's like the floor level, front, left, and right. So there's not much in here right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a CAD drawing that I have for my table, bring it in. I'll put one facing front and I'll put one facing left. And so we'll have something to trace and turn into the 3D model. Once we have our 3D model drawn, then we're going to have to add parameters. So let's get started by bringing in the CAD file. All right, so I am under floor plans. I'm on the reference level. On the Create tab of the ribbon, work plane, I click Show. If I don't have Show, I don't see that blue rectangle, but when I click Show, this blue rectangle represents my work plane. And if I want to change my work plane, I can set the work plane by choosing from the reference planes that I already have. Okay, so right now I'm on the reference level, and I'm going to go to Insert and import my CAD drawing into this reference level. From my files, I have a side view of a table, which is drawn in CAD, and I'll be bringing that in. So I can keep the CAD colors, show all the layers, but this drawing was drawn in feet. So I want to make sure I'm using feet for my import units. I'll bring it in from origin to origin. Hopefully that'll put it right in the center of my reference planes. I'll click Open. It showed up in the back view. All right, well, we'll go from here then. Let me check my 3D view. Can't really see anything. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I think this is actually really good. It's coming in here in the front back direction. So let me go to that front view. And what I want to do is trace this line work. And on the Create tab, I can extrude it, blend it, revolve it, sweep blend. I can use one of these tools to create the 3D table. If I click Revolve, I could use this line and this line here to revolve around the center line of that table and create the base of the table. So maybe I'll start there. Revolve. We have the boundary line and we have the axis line. So the boundary line, I'll be using this pick lines button to trace what I have in the CAD file. So I want this line, these two lines, and that line. Actually, it needs to be a closed boundary. So I'm going to click the center line and the table line, but I'll use this trim extend to corner tool to clean up those corners. I'll go from here to here, here to here, and here to here. Okay, so I have a closed boundary tracing half of the table base. Now I'm going to use axis line, and I'll use this pick line button. And I want to revolve this shape around the center line. So the center line is right here. I'm going to click on that. And when I'm finished, I can use the green check in the ribbon to finish. And that revolved it around that center axis line. If I go into 3D, this is what I just created. So I can actually change the visual style to shaded. So you can see it as a solid object, right? So I traced half of it, revolved it around that center axis. The next step is I'm going to take this little rectangle here and turn it into a larger rectangle by using extrusion. I'll go back into my front view and I'll use create extrusion. I get similar tools here. I'm going to use the pick lines button to trace that rectangle that represents the top of the table. You need to create a closed boundary again. And that's it. When I hit the green check to finish, it will use this default extrusion. So extrusion start will be at the work plane, 0, and extrusion end, right now it's going to make it just 1 foot wide or thick. Maybe we'll make that a little bigger. Let's go with 5 feet as a starting point, and then I'll finish. Okay, go back into my 3D view, and you'll see that it did create that extruded rectangle, and it did start at that work plane, right? So if I want to change this extrusion, I can select it, and up here, maybe I want extrusion start to be 2.5 and extrusion end to be negative 2.5, and that should make it centered. There it is. So it's centered. Okay. So what I've done is just modeled the 3D object. This is going to be a table family, but I want my table to not always be the same dimensions. Sometimes it will be this 5 foot wide table. Sometimes it might be smaller. Sometimes it might be bigger. So most Revit families have multiple types. And so within the type menu, you can choose different size tables. So we're going to talk about that next. CAD Masters offers online and classroom training for a variety of Autodesk software. For more information, go to www.cadmasters.com or give us a call at 925-939-1378. Let's go to the reference level. So I'm looking at a top-down view of this table. And the first thing we want to do is get the dimensions off of our current table. So I'm going to go to annotate. I'll use an aligned dimension. And I'm going to go from here to here, and then I'll place it. Probably need to change my scale a little bit. All right, so it's 4 feet wide in one direction and 5 feet wide in the other direction. Whenever you create a family, step 1, you have to 3D model that family. Step 2, you want to create reference planes that are locked to your object, and then you want to dimension between those reference planes. I drew these dimensions just to get an idea of what we already have, but we're actually going to delete them because our next step is creating reference planes that are locked to the sides of this table. Let me change my visual style. We're not going to worry about changing the size of the base, just the tabletop. So I'll use hidden line. Okay, so I'm focusing on that tabletop. On the Create tab, we have reference lines and reference planes. I want to use a reference plane because it's a 3D object that can be locked into the face of the sides of that table. So I'll draw a reference plane, and it doesn't matter too much where I put it. I'll put it maybe one up here and one down here. And I'll put one on the left, another one on the right. So I have one on each side of the table. This one up here, I'll just call this, it's probably the back. So I'll call it back of table. And then this one, I can name this front of table. And this one, left of table. This one, right of table. So naming it just helps you keep track. If you ever get to choose a reference plane, you'll be able to choose it by name. Okay, so now that I have the table drawn, the reference planes drawn, I need to lock them together. So locking them together can be done by using the Align tool. So on the Modify tab of the ribbon, I have this Align tool, the shortcut's AL. When I click Align, you want to start by clicking the object that is not going to move. So I'm going to click this top edge of the table first. Then you click the second object, which will snap to the first object. So I'm clicking this reference plane at the top. They snap together. So right when they snap together, you get the opportunity to lock them together. So I'm going to lock them. So I'll repeat that. I'm going to click the bottom face of the table, the bottom reference plane, lock them together. Left face of the table, left reference plane, lock them together. Right face of the table, right reference plane, lock them together. All right, so now I have them all locked together. Our next step is to create dimensions, not dimensioning the actual object, but dimensioning the reference plane distances. Okay, so on the Annotate tab, I'm going back to Aligned. I'm going to align from this left reference plane to this right reference plane, and then I'll just place that. I'll go from this top reference plane to this bottom reference plane, place that. Another thing we can do is make sure that the distance between this plane and the centerline plane, this plane and the centerline plane are always equal distance from each other, keeping this centered. So if I go from here to here to here, placing that dimension, there is this little EQ symbol, and it's crossed out, meaning they're not necessarily equal. If I click on the EQ, now forces them to be equal. All right, I'll do the same here, from left to center to right. I'll place it, and then I see that little EQ, click on it, and so now they will always be equal. No matter how I change these numbers, these lines will always stay in the middle, and the table will be centered on those lines. All right, so step 1, draw the object. Step 2, draw your reference planes. Step 3, lock your planes to your object. Step 4, add any kind of dimensioning that you would like. And now step 5 is going to be converting these dimensions into parameters. Parameters will allow us to create different types with different dimensions. Okay, so when you select this dimension, it's called a label, and right now it says none. We can click this button here to create the parameter. Okay, there are different kinds of parameters, and this can get very advanced. There's a family parameter that will only be used for this particular family, or there is a shared parameter that is stored in a external file, and it can be used for multiple families. So for this class, I'm only going to be using the family parameter. I'm going to give it a name. I'll call this the width of that tabletop. We can assign this parameter per type. So when I create a new type, I can assign a new width, or we can assign it per instance. If you use per instance, when you select this family, you'll be able to change that width in the properties window, right? So every single family can be adjusted through properties. So I'm going to go with the type method. And it is a dimension. This is just going to put it in the dimension category. Let's click OK. All right, so now it's given it a name, width, and it shows the default value. And up here, that label says width with the default value. So I'm going to repeat that over here. I'll select this 5-foot dimension. I'm going to create the parameter. It's a family parameter. I'm going to call this length. I'll have it adjusted per type, dimension. Okay. All right. So now I have two parameters, the length and the width. If we haven't saved this yet, we should probably save. I'm going to save that. Okay. So the next thing I want to take a look at is these buttons here. So this is a family category and parameters button. And we just want to double check that our family is in the right category. So it should be in the furniture category. That's correct. And then down here, let me just double check. I think we're okay. I think I want to be able to place this table anywhere, but I do want to keep it vertical. So these are okay. I'm going to click OK here. The second one is the family types. And this is the main lesson. I want to create a type that has a width 4 by 5, right? Or dimensions 4 by 5. So here I can create a new type, and I'll call this rectangular table, 4 foot by 5 foot. So here's the name of that type, and the length is 5 and the width is 4. So actually I might want to edit that. Maybe it'll be easier to remember if I do 5 by 4. So let me just use this edit or rename button. So I'll call it 5 foot by 4 foot. So then the length is 5 and the width is 4. So if I click OK, nothing really happens. Everything looks normal. But let's say I want to create a new type. Maybe I want a square table. Maybe I want it to be 5 by 5. I'll go here, family types. I'll make a new type, and I'll call it square table 5 by 5. So that's the name. I need to update these properties to match that name, like 5 feet right there. So 5 by 5, 5 by 5, okay. And now it's adjusted, it's 5 by 5. What I want to do is save this, bring it into a project, test it out, and then within that project, see if I can create additional type. Okay, so I'm going to save it, and I will start a project, new project. This will be, let me browse for a template. I'll use commercial default. Creating a project. And I'm just going to save this project and call it test project. Let's use 3 backup files and save. Okay, so I'm currently in level 1, but I want to insert that table into this level 1. So if I go back to my table file here, I could even take a look at it in 3D. If I go to that 3D view, right? I'm going to click load into project. I won't close it yet, just in case, but I'll load it into my project. Now it's on my cursor and I can click to put that down, escape. And let's go into a 3D view. If I don't have one yet, I can use this this little house to create a 3D view. There's my little table. Let me use a different mode here. All right, so that's my first table. When I click on it, I take a look at properties. The table is a rectangular table of 5x4. If I click the drop down, I do have a second type, square table 5x5. And you can see it did change, right? When I switch it between 5x4 and 5x5. All right, I'm going to copy this table. I'll have one of them be the rectangular 5x4, the other be the square 5x5, and I want to create one more type. So let's copy that again. Oops, copy. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to use edit type. So I'm going to duplicate this type, and I'll have it be a rectangular table. Let's make a really long table. Let's do 8 feet by 4 feet. And so the name is updated 8x4, but the actual dimensions have not yet been updated. I can change them here. 8 feet by 4 feet. Now they match. I'll click OK. And there's my longer table. So I have 3 different size tables. And they have all been saved as a different type. CAD Masters offers online and classroom training for a variety of Autodesk software. For more information, go to www.cadmasters.com or give us a call at 925-939-1378.